Good morning and good afternoon, and thank you all for joining us today. We have a very exciting webinar for our Untangle SD-WAN router. My name is Steve Young. I'm with the marketing team, and I want to welcome you all again. Today we have Brian Carmichael, who's our technical engineer here at Untangle, and he will be going over the SD-WAN router and doing a little demo for you. Just a couple of housekeeping items. If you don't hear any of the sounds coming out of this computer, you'll probably need to do some settings on your audio panel in the GoToWebinar panel. If you are dialing in, please use the access code and dial in number provided. We will be answering questions throughout this entire webinar, so please submit your questions into the Q&A box. And if we don't get to your question, we will be following up with you after the webinar. Our sales team will reach out. If you do have any questions that are not answered, or if you weren't unable to submit them, you can always reach out to us at sales@untangle.com. And again, that's sales@untangle.com. And I just want to remind everyone here in the audience that we do have our pre-order discount that is running until the end of the month for 40% off. Now, this is a pre-order discount, so you're not going to see this discount ever again. So I highly encourage you to go and pre-order, especially after you take a look at this demo, which I think is pretty impressive. So without further ado, take it away, Brian.
Thanks, Steve. So starting off with a little bit of the background for SD-WAN as a technology and how it kind of came about. So back in the day, we had a dedicated ISDN circuit for our telephony, so we didn't have it competing with our other internet applications. We also used primarily local desktop applications like Outlook, for example. So our reliance on the internet was kind of somewhat not quite as what it is today. So fast forward to today's type of business, we're dispersed. We've got remote satellite offices, people that work from home. We use web apps like Salesforce, Office 365, and G Suite, and our telephony is IP-based. So it's become very mission critical to have fast and reliable internet access. So one of the solutions for this is MPLS, but it does have a lot of drawbacks, so that it's not entirely suitable for all types of businesses. First and foremost, it's just very expensive. It has a long rollout period and may not even be available depending on where you're located, or if you're leasing an office in a larger building, you're not able to get the right permits and so forth to run fiber into the building. So it's just not always easily attainable, and as well, it requires infrastructure and provisioning. So especially if you're a business where you've got a lot of dispersed offices, MPLS is not always the best option. So that's where SD-WAN and as a technology, and of course our new SD-WAN router product come into play, with the objective being that we're letting you leverage multiple inexpensive internet links to get that same type of service level and application performance via a number of different technologies that I'll talk about, such as policy-based routing, dynamic path selection, and of course VPN connectivity. So as far as the high-level messaging of our SD-WAN router, the main pieces, the main objective solutions: business continuity, so making sure that internet access is always up and running; application performance, so making sure that your voice and video and all of the other business critical applications that you're using are all running smoothly; and then making sure that it's all secure. So obviously having some type of a firewall is very important. And then the branch office connectivity, so with VPN access for all of your different sites, being able to connect up to a main central VPN server. So getting into some of the features and sort of how we accomplish those general solutions. Connectivity and continuity. So as you see here, this is our E6WL. Features multiple WAN ports. LTE is a primary or failover type of a connection. Obviously, bringing together multiple links with automatic failover, detecting if it's down and stop, not using it as part of the load balancing scheme. And then the full tunnel VPN, which we're using OpenVPN for that. And then application performance. So one of the important differentiators of an SD-WAN router is the ability to route based on the type of application. And then part of that as well is the real-time link performance monitoring. So knowing which link is the best link to use for a particular application at any point in time. And then the internet link load balancing, so just making sure that you're leveraging properly each of your internet links, and then the QoS with the traffic shaping, so making sure that you're prioritizing certain types of services like voice and video, for example. And of course, as you're deploying, if you're an MSP or even just a single company with multiple sites, being able to centrally manage all of that from a cloud-based platform, that's where the command center comes in. So just like with our NG Firewall product, you can centrally manage all of your SD-WAN router deployments, and it supports as well the zero-touch provisioning, so you can drop it in and start remotely configuring it without having to be on site. And then as well some other nice maintenance capabilities, the fact that it automatically upgrades, and then you have the visibility of what's going on with the dashboard and the reports that I'll show a bit in the demo here. So traffic steering, this is one of the main values of an SD-WAN router, the main technologies, and the ability to direct traffic based on the very first packet where you have limited information at that point. So we've really built in a lot of key technologies so that we can actually identify based on that first packet what application it is. And then from that, we can know what category or risk level or the productivity level of that application so that you can base rules on it. We also have some other technologies that allow you to base rules on a DNS hint. So the URL or the host name that the user would be connecting to that would be associated with that new outgoing session, or the name that is on the SSL certificate. We have this kind of a special prefetch technology that we can actually figure out the SSL certificate host name or any other attributes of the certificate that you can base rules on from that first packet. And then aside from the applications or DNS names, you can also base routing decisions on the source interface or the source IP address, or the IP protocol port number and so forth. So a whole lot of criteria that I will show in the demo that you can base routing decisions on, whereas with a traditional router, you can really only make routing decisions based on the destination headers, so the IP address or the port number. So this is kind of a real huge differentiator of an SD-WAN router type product that we built here. So to point out the new appliances that we're introducing with the SD-WAN routers, what we're calling the E-series. So we've got 5 in total under 2 different lines. We've got the E3 and the E6. The E3 and E3W have 3 ports. The E3W has wireless with the 5 gigahertz AC, and both series are fanless, solid state, external power supply. So really designed for maximum uptime and reliability. And then the E6 has a few more LAN ports. We've got 4 LAN ports also with the dual WAN as well. There's fiber connectivity. So we have on the WAN side 2 shared ports. You can either choose fiber or Ethernet for the WAN. We do have a rack mount kit. So as you see, both units are desktop form factor, but for the E6 line, you can adapt a rack mount kit for a small cost for that. And of course, the most important differentiator with the E6 is on the WL, which is the LTE connectivity. So that's obviously a new capability that we're introducing that is pretty exciting. I should point out that for the time being, it is limited to T-Mobile as the carrier. We will be introducing AT&T and Verizon and others internationally in the near future, but for the initial release, it is limited to T-Mobile. One of the other new options that we're introducing with the E-Series is the hardware as a service. So you can choose the one-time payment and outright own the hardware, but we're also giving you the option of essentially renting the equipment on a monthly basis. And with that, you have an unlimited warranty. So there's free replacement if the hardware at some point becomes sort of outdated or has been deprecated by some new functionality that we've added in the software. So this is all very new, but a nice, interesting option for this hardware as a service. And it's also worth noting that this is available only in the United States for the time being. So we're also talking about the SD-WAN router in the context of our network security framework, where you would be introducing an NG firewall. So if you do need the web content filtering, intrusion prevention, you can combine the SD-WAN router with an NG firewall. So if you're running NG firewall at your headquarters, whether that's in a public cloud, in AWS, or private cloud, or on-prem, wherever you happen to be running it, you can connect up through VPN to the NG firewall, and you can have very advanced routing rules that I'll show in the demo to decide how you want to direct traffic. So you can say for productivity apps or for G Suite or Salesforce or stuff that, okay, this is, I want to have, direct connectivity for these types of applications. You can send those straight out through whatever the best link happens to be. But for any sort of questionable traffic, if it's unknown, if the risk level is high, I want to send that through my main headquarters gateway, where it's going to be filtered for web, for malware and for other next generation type firewall functionality. And of course, it's also giving you the VPN connectivity so that all of your backend servers in your private cloud or public cloud are also accessible from the branch offices via the VPN tunnels. So now I'll jump into a demonstration to show you a bit of the user interface and how that looks. So here I'm in Command Center, which many of you are probably familiar with that. So I've got a handful of appliances here, most of them NG Firewall, but I do have an E-Series, an E6WL appliance that I've connected here to my particular account. You see I get the same kind of widgets. We will be extending this a bit more in the near future, so we'll be adding more widgets to show aggregated link performance over time, so you can see how your WAN links have been performing across not just one, but multiple appliances. We're also going to be extending the options that you see in the top here to add a section specifically for your SD-WAN networks. So you can see multiple SD-WAN routers and even be able to push common policies such as WAN rules to multiple SD-WAN routers from a centrally managed point. And so we have the remote access, and this is what, of course, is giving you the single sign-on to any of your deployments. And I've got one here already set up. This is an E6WL, and this is the dashboard. So once you get logged in, this is what you'll see. And again, those of you that are familiar with NG Firewall, this kind of a dashboard looks somewhat familiar. We've got a lot of the same kind of widgets showing us general server information, the kind of license I have, the processor, and so forth, the CPU utilization over the last few minutes. The network layout, which you can see here, I've got 4 internet interfaces. I've got 2 WAN interfaces, an LTE interface, and then my VPN connection, which we can use as a WAN interface for full tunnel. And then all of my local network interfaces, which are all bridged together, and then my Wi-Fi connection as part of that. And then you see some of the other widgets. I can see my interface usage over a recent period of time, so I can see how each WAN link is being utilized. I can see the active latency over the recent period of time, so I can see which WAN links are the most performant in terms of the lowest latency. I can see the top applications over time, and then just the top applications in general. So in a quick overview, I get a nice little snapshot of how my network has been performing over the last so many hours. So now I'll jump into the a bit of the configuration. So if I go over here to settings, and then under network, this is where I've got my interface configuration. So you see here I've got my different interfaces, and if I go ahead and pop open, for example, here's my LTE interface. You can see very general configuration that it's a WAN interface. I'm NATing it, and here's where I select the carrier, which again is T-Mobile for the time being. It's very simple configuration. We've already pre-populated the APN. It's outputting the details of my SIM card. In terms of the SIM, what type of SIM to use, you can really just go into any T-Mobile store and get a SIM card preloaded with data. You can do the month to month or however you want to arrange that. Just make sure it's for a connected device, but it's a very straightforward process there. So you can get a hold of a SIM card through any T-Mobile dealer. Going into Wi-Fi. So this is again similar kind of settings that you have with the NG Firewall. You set your SSID, the type of encryption, a password, and then what type of mode, if you want to run it as a client or as an access point. So you can actually use it as a WAN interface if you are connecting to other wireless networks, and then you specify the channel. As you see here, we do support the 5 gigahertz band with this product. My VPN connection, so as again, this is OpenVPN, and we'll be extending actually to add other VPN protocols in the near future. For now, we're using OpenVPN, and so you can connect up to any OpenVPN server just by importing the VPN profile, which is just a matter of browsing to the file and then importing it. Pretty straightforward there. You can also choose to bind it to a specific WAN interface. So normally it's just going to use whatever the balancing scheme is or whatever the optimal link is based on my WAN rules. But if you want, you can sort of tie it to a specific WAN link. So that's, well, we'll go ahead and show some of the WAN links here as well. So if I look at one of my WAN connections, you'll see it's showing me my configuration. This is set for DHCP. I can, of course, set it for manual. We have the IPv6 configuration, which we do support IPv6 as well as the prefix delegation with this product. And then you have your QoS settings. So during the initial setup, it'll ask you, it'll do an automatic check and based on what it estimates as the performance. And if you want, you can override that. But the QoS is what sets up your whole traffic shaping scheme so that you can configure how to prioritize different types of traffic. And then getting into some of the LAN interfaces, pretty straightforward. This one's bridged. I believe LAN 1 is my configured, so you can set up your IPv6 and your DHCP server settings as well. So now I'll get into the routing, which is really the bulk of the SD-WAN router configuration. This is really how the primary piece, aside from the interface configuration, the WAN routing is really what the bulk of the configuration. So starting off with the WAN policies, this is defining how you want to direct traffic. So in my examples here, I've got a handful of rules. The first one here saying, whatever link of my 2 WAN links has the most available bandwidth. So if I click edit here just to pull that up, so the rule is enabled, or the policy is enabled rather. I've given it a description. The type, I can choose a specific WAN, best WAN, or a balanced WAN. I've chosen a best WAN, and then under the metric, I can choose the lowest latency, highest available bandwidth, lowest jitter, lowest packet loss across either all of my WANs or specific WANs that I select. So we're polling for these metrics every 10 seconds. So that's how we're able to identify what the best WAN is almost in real time in terms of whether it's got the lowest jitter or the lowest packet loss or the lowest latency. So again, every 10 seconds, we're polling for this information. So some of the other WAN policies that I've configured is the lowest latency, lowest jitter, lowest packet loss. So I've created policies based on the different types of best WAN criteria. And then I've got 2 other policies. One here is the LTE. So I'm forcing any traffic out my LTE interface, and then I'm forcing traffic out my VPN interface. So those are the other 2 policies I've set as a specific WAN. So I've got some best WAN rules and specific WAN rules. So now, or policies rather. So now if we go into rules, this is where you actually specify the conditions that you're going to apply to those policies. So looking at this sort of sample set of rules that I've created here, I've said, okay, I want to drop any high-risk applications. So if I edit this rule, the way I've configured it is any application which has a risk of 5, which is a high risk, let's drop that. So it's actually going to set the bandwidth to 0 for that particular application if I choose drop as the action. You can also choose to reject it. Here's the list of the different actions that I can apply to this condition. I can reject it, or I can defer to a WAN policy. I can send it out a really slow link if I want. I've also decided for online gaming that I'm going to drop those. So if I edit this rule, I've configured the condition as an application category. Let's see if I cancel that. So these are the other, just to sort of show you the other types of conditions I can apply. I can choose the application name, application category, protocol, the risk factor, which is a value of 1 to 5, productivity, which is also a value of 1 to 5. And at this point, I should probably point out, so you notice we have in parentheses inferred. And that's part of this first packet detection technology that we use. So at that first packet, all we know is the port number and the IP addressing information, the protocol, kind of limited details. So we actually do a cloud lookup against our database where we've associated known IPs, known port numbers, that a lot of metadata against applications. So that way we can build policies. We can know based on that first packet what application is associated with it. And then you can base routing rules on that. We also do sort of an after the fact assessment. So we also have something that you'll see in the reports called matched. So at that point, we've done a little bit more of a thorough analysis of the actual session to validate, okay, this was the Skype application. Now, occasionally there may be a discrepancy. And if that happens, then we report back to the cloud service, we update that information so that it's now going to be updated live for anyone else that performs that same query against that IP and port association. So going through some of the other rules that I've set up here, I've created a special rule just for our site here, untangle.com, and I said give it, whatever the lowest latency WAN is. Same thing for voice. I've said, for SIP-based VoIP, send that through the WAN link that gives me the lowest jitter. Medium, high, very high productivity apps. So productivity apps that have a value of 3 to 5, I'm sending those out my WAN links that have the highest available bandwidth. So like my applications like Salesforce, for example, or Office 365, those are going to end up being routed through whichever WAN link gives me the most available bandwidth. And then I've created a policy here that says if you don't know what application it is, or basically if none of the rules above have applied, then just send it through my VPN. So everything else is going to go through my NG firewall that I've got running in AWS in this particular instance. And then my last rule here is an LTE fallback. So what this is saying, because again, rules are processed from top down, if none of these rules apply, or if a WAN link is not available, or if all the WAN links are not available, because that's what happens is if the WAN links that are in the WAN policy of a rule are down or unavailable, it just switches or reverts to the next rule in the list. So I've got this LTE fallback rule at the very bottom that says if none of the other rules were applied, fall back to my LTE connection. So that way I can use my LTE as a failover. So then going into just some of the final pieces of the configuration, we've got your filter rules. So this is your general firewall. And now back onto the WAN rules, I was showing you that you can do essentially the same kind of thing from there. It's the same type of rule set. So, I was dropping games or I was dropping high-risk applications. You can set up the same kind of policies here in the filter. Access, these are rules that allow access to the firewall itself. Under NAT, these are advanced NAT rules. These are your traffic shaping rules. So this is another important component of the SD-WAN router. Under prioritization, I've set up a few different policies here. So I'm saying for SIP-based VoIP, already I had WAN rules to say use the lowest jitter links, but then I'm going to say, okay, also I want you to prioritize SIP protocol. So when you are sending it out the link, which might be used by other applications, give it the highest priority. Same is true for ping and for DNS, which are very important components that you want to make sure have the highest priority. And then as well for high productivity apps where the value is 5, give that the second highest priority. I've also given the remote access category for applications a high priority of 2. Then for my low productivity apps, so if the productivity score is a 1, so that's going to be like your torrents or other types of things that you may even want to just drop altogether. I've given those the lowest possible priority. And then my default priority. So for everything else, just give that sort of your general priority 3, which is kind of your average. If I don't know what it is, give it sort of a general type of priority. So that's how I've set up this prioritization. Obviously, you can set it up however you like. And going forward, as I was pointing out, these types of policies are things that you'll be able to centrally manage through Command Center to build a common set of templates or policies that you can roll out to multiple deployments of SD-WAN router. Getting into the system, just sort of finishing up with the configuration, we've got our settings here. We can reconfigure the time zone and the host name, reset the admin account password, configure when to perform upgrades. So you may not want an upgrade to happen right during the middle of business hours. So the default is to perform during the weekend at midnight. And you can of course change that, or if you want to manually update the update or the installation file for beta testing, for example, and then our logging, the license information, and the about. So that's it for the configuration. Now I'll jump over to the reporting. So just to show you some of the reports, those of you who are familiar with NG Firewall, some of these types of pre-built reports may look familiar. Top clients by bandwidth, top applications by bandwidth. So I can see, that we've got some Reddit traffic here, some YouTube and Salesforce, top applications over time. So some nice charts that we can see. You can see here that it just started a few hours ago and as folks started coming into the office. Now if I go into interfaces, I can see my interface usage. This is more appropriate for the SD-WAN router. I can see again as people came into the office, the usage really spiked here, starting around 7:30 a.m. I can see my packet loss over time, the jitter. So you can see obviously my VPN link here has a bit more jitter because it has a much longer way to go. My average latency and a few different latency charts here. And then in my sessions, probably the most relevant or interesting list here is the WAN routing. So this way I can see for every session how it was routed. So I can see all the details of the session. So for this client address at this time, it used my WAN number 1. The session was going to the United States. It was for the application Google. And the reason was because it matched the rule ID that I've set up for a medium productivity app, which I wanted those to go through the highest available bandwidth link. So you can see some other applications just going through the list. Looks like some iCloud, some NBC traffic, Google APIs. And so I can see how that was was routed. I believe I've got, yeah, so here's one that went out my VPN link because it was to an IP address that we didn't know anything about, and we weren't sure what application might have been associated with that session. So we just sent that straight through the VPN link because it was somewhat untrusted. So let's see, scrolling through, here's another one. This is a Roku, probably shouldn't even be on the network, and we sent that out the VPN link. So yes, the WAN routing is probably one of the most relevant reports that you would be interested in with SD-WAN router. So that was pretty much the last piece that I wanted to show in the demo here. I know colleague John has been probably answering a number of questions. Steve is confirming that there was probably a number of questions that have come through. Let's see. So it looks like, yeah, most of the questions have been answered.
Yep. So for the rest of the people on the webinar, yes, this product will be available in Europe. Several people asked that. So yes, we will have this available. You can also order direct from our distributors in Europe as well. So we have a number of distributors in Portugal, Netherlands, Germany, UK. And so that will be available. A recording of this webinar will be made available for everyone to watch again as well. So yes, you will be able to go back with your teams and review everything that Brian has said. And you can always download and beta test, anything as well. And I think if you're done, Brian, then we'll just let people ask more questions.
Yeah, I see a few coming through here. One is a very good question about, what if they already have an existing firewall? Can we layer this in front or behind it? How would it work in combination with an existing firewall? And so obviously being that it needs to have the direct internet connectivity to be able to determine the WAN link performance and to be able to route to a specific WAN link, it does need to sit at the very network edge. So this device would need to be connected directly to the internet. So if you did want to have a firewall or a more sophisticated NG firewall that, as I was mentioning with the network framework, ideally you would be running an NG firewall and connecting to it through VPN, or if you were to run a firewall on the same local network, you would want to run the firewall behind the SD-WAN router, and ideally in some type of a bridged mode so that you would avoid the scenario of the double NAT. So yes, you can certainly run another a firewall type product behind an SD-WAN router, but again, you would want to run that in a bridge mode just to avoid the double NAT.
We had a couple of questions on licensing, bandwidth licensing. Can you just go over that a little bit?
Yes, actually, I thought I was going to include a slide about that, but I suppose I didn't. So yeah, that's definitely a good question. So we do have, it's not device-based. So with NG Firewall, obviously we license based on the number of devices on the network. With the SD-WAN router, the licensing is based on performance tiers. So we started at a 50 megabit per second tier, then to 100, then to, I believe, a 150, or it might just go straight to 300. I'd have to double check on that. But yeah, and then from 300 to 500, then unlimited. So it's based on the different bandwidth tiers. So that's how we're doing the licensing for the SD-WAN router. And I should also point out that, so unlike with NG Firewall, where you can actually purchase the hardware appliance without a software license and still run it as in kind of platform only, with SD-WAN router, it does need to be licensed. So if you purchase the hardware, it needs to be purchased also with some type of a subscription. So the minimum being the 50 megabit package. And you can see on our website the pricing on our standard configurator. If you go to untangle.com and click on the Get Untangle, from there you can use our configurator to price out, what the cost is. And again, as Steve pointed out, worth pointing out again, we are running the 40% discount on the software portion of SD-WAN router. for now.
All right. So we'll be taking some more questions, and we'll be answering questions, and then that's the end of our webinar. So thank you all for joining us today. Please send in your questions. If we don't get to them, obviously when we exit the GoToWebinar, please email all of your questions to sales@untangle.com. And again, that's sales@untangle.com if you have questions. And thank you all for attending, and we hope you have a great rest of your week. All right, we're going to end the webinar, but thank you all for coming again. And again, if we haven't gotten back to all of your questions, we will reach out soon. And if you don't have any questions now, but maybe you do later, please email us at sales@untangle.com. Thank you.